Comfortable?
Yep. I need new camera roll too.
We're rolling, we're set, thank you.
When you grow up in a family business, it's all around you from a very early age. There's no sense of starting work at 9 o'clock and finishing at 5 o'clock. There's no sense of turning business on and off. So News Corporation and business is, it is my life, as it is my father's and brothers and the whole family. And I think that's I hope it's a healthy thing because it's the only thing I've ever known.
Everyone sort of likes the idea of a soap opera, and the reality is really not that. We actually are a very close family. I love my brothers, I love my sisters. We're a normal family. We just have a bit of a spotlight on us.
I think that all of Murdoch's children, their stories are about proving themselves to their father. Lachlan's story is the happiest story. All Lachlan had to do to prove himself to his father was to be Lachlan, to be adoring, to see the world the same way Rupert did. That was Lachlan's ace in the hole in the succession fight.
A recent New Yorker article about your brother.
Lachlan Murdoch is the chosen son, the CEO of Fox Corporation, the ultimate boss at Fox News, but he operates almost entirely in the shadows.
What drives Lachlan? Paddy, I'm not his psychiatrist. I think Lachlan is doing Rupert proud.
Lachlan wins the crown, but he finds himself estranged from his family.
It reads like an episode of Succession.
Billionaire Rupert Murdoch is said to be in a legal battle against his children.
Rupert wants to give sole control of his right-wing media juggernaut to his like-minded son, Lachlan.
How are you feeling today, Mr. Murdochs?
Great, thanks.
Rupert set this up to be a fight between his children. So there's a lot of poignant family drama mixed up in this very corporate, very global fight. But this is still, at the end of the day, family. And now it's really broken.
Topic of Lachlan Murdoch.
Lachlan Murdoch, you say?
This book by
acclaimed journalist and author Paddy Manning.
Paddy Manning has a great name and he's here to give us
Paddy really is the leading expert internationally on Lachlan Murdoch.
The Lachlan Murdoch biography, The Successor.
Manning's unauthorised biography of Lachlan Murdoch is making headlines around the world.
He wrote a biography of Lachlan Murdoch and made a podcast on Rupert Murdoch. And his PhD thesis is on 100 years of News Corporation in Australia.
Paddy, the reason I'm here is to support your book, mate, because it is important we bring scrutiny to bear on the Murdoch enterprise. People in politics are frightened to take on Murdoch directly. The Murdoch media, Murdoch Senior, Murdoch Junior, Murdoch period. And it is not an irrational fear.
Welcome to our fancy archive vault.
Oh, thank you. We're looking for the original camera tapes of an interview that Lachlan did for the ABC back in 2001, because we're making this documentary series about him, but he won't do an interview, so we're sort of dependent on the archive.
We're looking for number 644.
Okay.
641, 642. Should be in this bin. And these are the 3 tapes that you requested.
Brilliant. That looks like Holt Street. I reckon I've been in there.
You're a product of an international culture.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I was born I hate to say this because I'm embarrassed, but I was born in London, and grew up great part of my life in the early years in the U.S. Picked up this bloody accent, which I wish I could get rid of, but I can't. And we've always felt from the time I was a very young child until now that we are Australians living overseas, expatriates.
To understand Lachlan Murdoch, you really need to understand his family's history. And that means not just understanding Rupert's career, but understanding his grandfather, Sir Keith Murdoch, as well. And of all Rupert's kids, Lachlan's the one that's most invested in the Murdoch mythology. It's a big part of his story.
Sir Keith Murdoch was undoubtedly one of the enigmas of Australian journalism, being described variously as tyrannical, humane, narrow-minded, a great liberal, power-hungry, and a true patron of the arts.
I wish I had met Keith Murdoch, but he died long before I was born. My grandfather was a journalist. That was all he wanted to be from the time he was a very young boy. That was despite the fact that my grandfather was painfully shy and had a serious and often debilitating stammer. In 1921, he took over editorial control of the Herald. He would turn a modest company into one of the world's largest evening newspapers. He was uncompromising and correct in his belief that the media not be controlled by any elite, be they social, political, or economic.
For Lachlan Murdoch, Adelaide is where the culture of News Corporation was really established. And it's where his father Rupert came in 1953 and took over the Adelaide News after the death of Sir Keith.
Newspapermen aren't soft, and young Rupert certainly didn't look very hard with his round face and socialist ideals. However, violent tremors soon were felt all over conservative Adelaide, when it became known just how single-minded Murdoch could be.
Well, there it is, old son. Very different today, very different.
4 years ago.
Hey.
Hi, Paddy.
Mark, how are you?
Nice to see you. Thanks for inviting us.
The old stomping ground?
That's where it all used to be, but it's very different now. It used to be a 3-story building, and that was Rupert's office on the far left. It's a breakfast room in the Playford Hotel now. My name's Mark Day. I joined the News on February 29, 1960.
I'm Rex Jory. I joined in 1959 as a trembling copy boy, and we're probably really the last of the very first people who worked with Rupert in Adelaide.
You gotta remember, the Adelaide News was the #2 paper in the market to the Adelaide Advertiser, so there's also this underdog culture. The News Corporation still, I think, operates best as an underdog when we're uncomfortable and when we're really striving.
Well, I think that's absolutely correct, because the News was the underdog paper, Rupert was the underdog publisher, and he did have to fight, and he fought well. He learned that there's nobody on his side except himself.
I'm still the most involved in that.
How did he make the Adelaide News profitable?
He found ways of saving money in the smallest possible way. He used newsprint in the toilets for people to dry their hands.
He launched a lot of campaigns about the living conditions of Aborigines and so on, and it was, these days you describe it as true bleeding heart left attitudes. But he discovered that there was no financial reward, or no great financial reward, and that heightened his appreciation of what did sell, what did work, what did make profits.
I might be reckless at times, I suppose.
Murdoch's entry into Sydney was both swift and dramatic with the $2 million purchase of Cumberland Press. He consolidated the position with the Daily Mirror and Truth, promptly renamed the Sunday Mirror.
He had a sign up pinned on the wall for all of us cadets, make it bright, tight and right. He wasn't ever an intimidating presence in the newsroom. He was just there, the boss is in here working, quite often in his shirt sleeves. It wasn't at all clear that he was going to conquer the world, but he had newsprint running in his veins.
I find Rupert a very gentle man. He's very compatible. He's a generous man. He's also highly idealistic, which I think is something that most people don't understand.
Tell us about Anna Torv. How did you meet her?
Well, she applied to become a cadet and we just became friends. I liked her and she liked me and, yeah, we became buddies. Her father was Estonian, her mother was Scottish, and the family came to Australia when she was young and lived in Blacktown. She put her hand up and became the editor of the Cadet magazine. And in that job, she had the chutzpah to ask for an interview with Murdoch. She was absolutely smitten with him. Then Rupert started the Australian and Anna moved to Canberra with Rupert and they moved in together.
Why did Rupert launch the Australian?
Because his father said there's got to be a national newspaper.
I think the Australian has given Rupert a national voice, which in turn is national power.
Do you like the feeling of power you have as a newspaper proprietor?
Well, there's only one honest answer to that, of course, and that's yes.
By 1968, his newspaper empire was flourishing, and Rupert Murdoch had emerged as a powerful press baron, now keen to seek new titles in the old world.
Rupert Murdoch clearly understood that Fleet Street was the place to be. It was a place where if you owned a newspaper, you could make an awful lot of money. In 1968, when he heard about the fact that the News of the World was available, it opened the door for him and he leapt through. One of his first moves at the News of the World was to rehash something called the Profumo affair, a big sex and politics scandal. And it looked as if he was taking the News of the World even further down market.
London began to notice Rupert Murdoch. He bought the failing Sun newspaper at a giveaway price, transforming its image and circulation figures. It's proved to be a gold mine. Some critics claim it has lowered the standards of Fleet Street.
I'm not ashamed of any of my newspapers at all. And I'm rather sick of snobs who tell us that they're bad papers, snobs who only read papers that no one else wants.
The combination of a down-market News of the World, the fact that he ran lots of sex surveys and page 3 girls in the Sun, cemented the view of Rupert Murdoch as the dirty digger and a sleaze merchant.
The disapproval of the British establishment was one thing, but at the end of 1969, Something terrible happened in London that changed the way the Murdochs felt about the place. Rupert and his family were in Australia for Christmas, but just before he left, he lent his car to his deputy, Alec McKay.
My name is Ian McKay. I'm the son of Alec McKay, who worked for Rupert Murdoch in his UK operation. My father joined Rupert Murdoch just some 10 days before my mother was kidnapped. Rupert suggested, as he left for Australia, that my father should use his Rolls-Royce and chauffeur. The kidnappers, after seeing the Rolls-Royce outside of the News of the World offices, decided to follow it.
These people kidnapped Muriel McKay thinking that was Anna Murdoch.
Well, I was in Australia at the time, and I phoned my father, and he said this terrible thing's happened. Sorry.
Mr. McKay, you flew in from Australia this morning. How optimistic are you now?
Mother-in-law. Well, of course, so long as one just hopes that she'll be returned as soon as possible. I mean, I'm just so stunned. I don't understand.
And the kidnappers were demanding £1 million.
9462656.
Hello? Yes.
Who's speaking, please?
Oh, it's McKay here.
Alex, if you want her back, you've got to bring the money, all right?
Well, nobody's got £1 million, and I mean, quite frankly, it's ridiculous to talk about it.
Give me a few days and...
Look, you give me 10 years, everyone. You might as well kill me now.
If you don't cooperate...
I'm cooperating, but I can't cooperate with impossible sums.
I have this letter here, which is appalling, but it was the first letter we received from the kidnappers, and it's written by my mother, obviously at the direction of the kidnappers. Alec, darling, I'm blindfolded and cold. What have I done to deserve this treatment? Can you do something, please? Just a hopeless situation.
Could the newspaper not have just paid the ransom?
I've often wondered whether it had been Anna, whether he would have found the money.
Did Alec ask Rupert to pay?
No, he didn't. I mean, he regarded it as an absurd sum of money.
The police tactics worked out. They managed to locate who the kidnappers were, and they arrested them.
They charged the two kidnappers with my mother's murder, but they could never get any admission. They never got any help, and we'd very much like to be able to discover her remains.
So how was Anna affected by the kidnapping?
It certainly affected how Anna thought of being in Britain, and certainly tightened security for her and Rupert.
That really did affect me much more, my living in Britain, than anything about the Profumo case or rerunning the story.
You were the intended target for the kidnappers?
Yes.
That must have been a nightmare.
It wasn't so bad for us as it was for Alec McKay, but certainly one has to think about it. And it coloured my time there in Britain after that happened.
Was that why you left?
Partly.
Wow. This is some prestige real estate. We've come to London because this is where Lachlan Murdoch was born in 1971. He was the second child of Rupert and Anna. Elisabeth, his older sister, had been born in Sydney. And they also had custody of Prudence, Rupert's daughter from his first marriage, who was about 10 years old by now. I think the Murdochs, you know, they didn't love their time here. And certainly the murder of Muriel and McKay really cast a pall over the Murdochs' time in London. So I think Lachlan, even as a really young kid, has absorbed some of that.
That's what Murdoch does. He's very well known for that, Murdoch. Did you know that? Murdoch's a table banger.
Oh, really?
I'm Jim Rutenberg, and I've been writing about the Murdochs off and on for the better part of 25 years. Rupert Murdoch conquers the tabloid world of the UK. But what Rupert Murdoch is driven to do is to not only have a foothold in America, but to be a major player, if not the biggest player in America. He's looking for a newspaper in New York. He finds it in the New York Post, and it's off to the races.
We moved to New York when I was 3 or 4 years old, and we were very, extremely close. It was very exciting, actually, so intellectually, growing up in the family.
America's reaction to Rupert Murdoch was prompted more by fear than admiration. He was seen as a journalistic King Kong let loose among the citadels of American journalism.
I remember one cover of Time magazine that had my father as King Kong on top of the World Trade Center with a little plane trying to shoot him down. And that was the first memory that I have that, the other dads at school weren't on the cover of Time magazine portrayed as this monster.
To be the child of someone very much in the public eye and in public controversies, children do pay a price for that.
How would you describe your dad?
Well, different from what the newspapers say and the TV shows. Well, I think that the papers and the shows about him and stuff make him look a little like too mean and dark and sinister. And really, he's a really nice person, a fun person.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
When you behave.
Let me ask you this question, and that's a wonderful admission that you just made. Tell us about your dad. You see him like nobody else sees him. Tell us a little story. This is another
witness for the defense.
All right, go ahead. We're talking about your father. I'm Stanley Siegel. And you know your brother, and of course you know your father, right? Tell us about your father a little bit. Tell us the best thing about your dad.
Best thing?
Yes.
Let's see. Well, he always likes to go camping with us, and we're going camping after the Olympics for a week.
Does he spend a lot of time with you?
Yes.
Liz and James and I would come up to breakfast before we had to get the bus to school, and all the papers would come out. And my dad would be handing out stories to us and say, read that, or see this. Or he'd say, look at that headline, that's a shocking headline, and that's badly subbed. We're like 7 years old and 8 years old. And we sort of began to understand that we were part of the media business.
He grew up at the feet of his father, and he saw how it all worked. A young kid. And years later, I went to a dinner, and in the middle table, there sat Rupert with Lachlan next to him, and Lachlan had one of those tiny little reported notepads, and he was assiduously making notes as Dad was speaking to him. And Anna looked over and said, isn't that sweet? He's acting just like his dad.
Your sons, are they planning to go into the newspaper business?
I think so, and so is my daughter. I mean, I can see lots of arguments along the way.
Yeah.
Who knows what will happen?
Rupert always wanted one of his kids to run the empire the same way as Keith had wanted him to run it. But Anna knew it was going to be trouble. And she said it in here. So this is Anna Murdoch's second novel, Family Business, it's called. Written in 1987, the kids are all teenagers, and she's thinking, how is this succession thing gonna play out? Yarrow McLean, the key character, who is, I think, broadly the Rupert Murdoch figure, has 3 kids, has the newspaper business, and there's this great line in here. I've called you all here this morning because I have something important I want to say. I thought you would come to trust and respect each other. I thought that responsibility would teach each of you humility. I was wrong. It taught you greed and disloyalty and hatred. I've decided for the sake of peace and harmony to sell McLean Publishing.
Anna, the book Family Business.
I wanted to show the breakup within the family, that I think power and money can actually affect sibling relationships.
I think Anna's advice in this book is don't bother trying to hand it on to the kids. You might want to, but you know, no good will come of it.
Princeton University, an Ivy League college among America's finest. Lachlan graduated from here last year, majoring in philosophy.
I chose a school near New York so that I could get back and see my parents quite regularly. At the time, I was doing a lot of sports. I was doing a lot of climbing specifically.
He was a quite striking presence in class, although rather quiet. He was very intense, very thoughtful, very kind. But my impression is that he was rather isolated as a student because of his interest in rock climbing.
I studied philosophy and specifically sort of ethics, but I wasn't a great student. I tended to leave everything to the last minute, so I'd be finishing up my essays and at the last second of the morning they had to be due in.
That's the journalist in you, perhaps, isn't it?
Absolutely, that's right. Pushing those deadlines whenever I can.
Lachlan's thesis was on Kant, a German philosopher, and more particularly his conception of morality. My own impression is that his interest in ethics was mainly related to making himself the best person he could be. It was a fine thesis, not an exceptional thesis, but a good thesis, an interesting one. Well, there was a graduation dinner in New York. Rupert made a very short speech just to say that he was proud of his son, but then the younger brother, James, made a speech which was very funny, where he, I think typically for him, made it kind of a joke and said, well, we're all celebrating Lachlan, but I've done actually much better than him. And then went on to list all the goofing ups he may have done during his youth that were much better, much bigger than what Lachlan had done.
I realized at one stage I had to make a decision as to what I was gonna do. And I was actually at the time reading one of the biographies of Sir Keith, and I thought about his life, and I had a unique opportunity. So I thought, how could you not take up that opportunity to be a part of the larger community and to play a role which hopefully you could bring a lot of good to.
After Lachlan graduated from Princeton, Rupert sent him to Brisbane, home of the family company icon, Queensland Press.
I'm very pleased about it, but it'll be a test.
I work as hard as I can to do as much as I can, and I take one challenge at a time.
There seems to be a lot of focus on who will be Rupert Murdoch's successor. Do you think that could be you of the 4 children?
Oh, I can't think that far ahead. I will work on Queensland and do the best job I can in Brisbane.
There
was a clear plan that each of the kids would move into the company, just as it was ordained and inevitable that Rupert himself would take over from his father Keith Murdoch.
All right. Thank you very much.
These are the facts of life in the Murdoch family.
Who is Lachlan Murdoch?
Well, it's a good question.
God, people are complex, right? He's my friend.
I had a breakdown. Lachlan was incredibly kind to me.
I said to him, "Where's my fucking money?"
Lachlan decided he's out.
I said to Rupert, he'll be back when you need him.